When the universe faded, humanity reignited the stars. The stars were dying. Professor June Park stood alone in the observatory dome, watching the night sky through the massive telescope. Each tiny point of light seemed dimmer than he remembered. From his childhood, it wasn't his imagination. The measurements confirmed it. Stars across the galaxy were fading at an accelerating rate. "Professor, the council meeting starts in 10 minutes. His assistant Hana appeared at his side, tablet in hand. June nodded without looking away from the view screen. "Tell me, Hana, do you remember how Betelgeuse used to shine?" "I was born after it dimmed," she said quietly. "It was magnificent, bright orange-red, visible even in light-polluted skies." He sighed. "Now it's barely visible at all." The Galactic Council chamber buzzed with anxious conversations when June arrived. Representatives from 17 advanced alien species had gathered to discuss the crisis. Their civilizations had explored the stars for millennia before humans took their first steps into space. They considered themselves the wise elders of the galaxy. Ambassador Lee, Earth's representative, motioned June to a seat beside her. "They're not in a mood to listen today," she whispered. The council leader, a tall being with silvery skin named Moro, called the meeting to order. "The rate of stellar decay has increased by 12%, he announced. "Our scientists project total collapse of galactic civilization within 3 centuries as energy sources fail." A wave of murmurs swept through the chamber. "We must conserve what remains," declared Moro. "The council recommends immediate energy rationing across all worlds, abandonment of outer colonies, and preparation for a future of minimal power consumption." "And then what?" June found himself standing, though he hadn't planned to speak. "We huddle around the embers until they go cold?" Ambassador Lee tugged at his sleeve, but he continued. "With respect, conserving resources while stars continue to fade is merely prolonging our end, not preventing it." "And what would humans suggest?" asked a reptilian delegate with obvious disdain. "Your species has barely mastered interstellar travel. We suggest finding out why the stars are dying and fixing the problem," June replied. The chamber erupted in dismissive laughter. "The arrogance," hissed a delegate. "The fundamental forces of the universe are failing. This is cosmic entropy, not a broken machine to be repaired." Moro raised a hand for silence. "Professor Park, I understand humans are optimistic by nature, but some processes are beyond intervention. The Council has studied this phenomenon for over a century. The universe is simply reaching the end of its luminous phase." "With respect," June said, "I believe you're wrong." Back on Earth, June entered the underground research facility, where his team had been working in secret for years. Director Sun greeted him at the security checkpoint. "How did they take it?" she asked, walking alongside him down the long corridor. "Exactly as expected. They think we're naive children." Director Sun smiled. "Perhaps that's our advantage. Children ask questions adults have stopped asking." They entered the central chamber where dozens of scientists worked at various stations. At the center stood a massive holographic display showing a model of stellar decay. "Show me what you found," June said to the young physicist waiting for him. Da-hyun, barely 30 but already brilliant in quantum stellar dynamics, manipulated the controls. "We've been analyzing radiation patterns from the fading stars. There's something strange in the quantum signature." The hologram zoomed into subatomic level. "Here, the energy isn't simply dissipating. It's converting to a form we haven't seen before." "Not dying," June muttered. "Transforming." "Exactly." Da-hyun's eyes lit up. "It's like the stars are trying to evolve but can't complete the process. They need a catalyst." Later that night, June met with the Human Leadership Council. Military commanders, scientists, and government officials listened as he explained his team's findings. "The other species think in linear terms because their worlds have been stable for millions of years," he explained. "But Earth has survived multiple extinction events. Humans understand collapse and renewal in ways they don't." "What exactly are you proposing?" asked the president. "Project Prometheus," Director Sun said, displaying schematics on the screen. A device that can supply the missing catalyst stars need to complete their transformation. The Galactic Council will oppose this, warned the defense minister. Which is why we need to move quickly and prove it works, June replied. We'll test it on Proxima Centauri. 2 months later, June watched the experimental ship prepare for launch. The massive vessel contained the first Prometheus device, built with technology the other species had never imagined because they'd never needed to reinvent themselves. Chief Engineer Min approached him on the observation deck. Systems are green. We're ready. The Council has threatened sanctions if we proceed, June said. Min shrugged. Better to act and be punished than do nothing and watch the universe die. As the ship lifted off, June thought about humanity's strange position in the galaxy. Too young to be respected, too stubborn to accept the end, too familiar with disaster to fear taking risks. If stars could be saved, humans would find a way. After all, they had always thrived in the darkness, always reached for the light. The ship carrying the Prometheus device approached Proxima Centauri after 3 weeks of travel. Commander Deho stood on the bridge watching the dying star through the main viewport. Once bright red, it now glowed a dull crimson, its light barely reaching the ship's sensors. Status report, he ordered. Device is stable, answered Science, Officer Yuna without looking up from her console. Power levels optimal. We're in position to begin the procedure. Deho nodded and opened a communication channel. Earth Command, this is the starship Keonsa. We've reached deployment coordinates. Director Sun's voice came through clearly despite the distance. Confirmed, Keonsa. The Council has sent another warning. They're threatening to send ships to intercept or will be done before they arrive, Deho said confidently. The bridge crew worked in focused silence. They all understood what was at stake. If they failed, humanity would be condemned as reckless children who couldn't follow rules. If they succeeded, they might save the galaxy. Yuna approached Deho with a tablet. Sir, final diagnostics complete. There's something you should see. The commander studied the data with growing concern. The star's degradation is accelerating. We have less time than we thought. Should we abort? Asked Navigation Officer Minho. Deho considered this for a long moment. No. We adjust the timeline. Prepare for immediate deployment. Back on Earth, Professor June paced nervously in the control center. The large screens showed real-time data from the Keonsa, including the deteriorating condition of Proxima Centauri. They're deploying early, observed Director Sun, her face tense in the blue light of the monitors. They don't have a choice, June replied. The star won't last another day without intervention. The technicians around them worked frantically, monitoring the incoming data streams. One of them suddenly looked up. Professor, we're detecting 3 ships entering the Proxima system. Council enforcement vessels, Director Sun confirmed after checking her display. They'll reach the Keonsa in approximately 30 minutes. June grabbed the communication mic. Deho, you have incoming. Council ships half an hour out. Understood, came the calm reply. We're launching the device now. On the main screen, they watched as the Keonsa released the Prometheus device. The small, intricate machine looked impossibly tiny against the vast backdrop of the dying star. It moved on its own power, approaching the stellar surface. Device is active and functioning normally, reported Yuna's voice over the communication channel. Beginning catalyst injection sequence. The device disappeared into the outer layers of the star. For several minutes, nothing seemed to happen. The control room on Earth fell completely silent, every person holding their breath. Then the sensors began registering changes. Subtle at first, small fluctuations in the star's magnetic field, shifts in its quantum signature. It's working, whispered June, hardly daring to believe it. The star's output began to increase gradually. The dull red glow brightened, becoming the vibrant crimson that had once been Proxima Centauri's signature. Energy levels up 12%, announced a technician. 15%, 20%. Director Sun gripped June's arm. We did it, but their celebration was premature. A warning alarm sounded through the control room. Something's wrong, said Deho's voice, now tense. The reaction is becoming unstable. On the screen, Proxima Centauri flared suddenly, blindingly bright. Then just, as quickly it began to collapse in on itself. What's happening? Demanded Director Sun Jun stared at the readings in disbelief. The catalyst is working too efficiently. It's accelerating the star's transformation process beyond our predictions. Cheonsa, get out of there now, Director Sun ordered. Negative, replied Deho. We need to collect complete data on the process. The star continued to collapse, its massive bulk seeming to fold inward until it was a fraction of its former size. Then, abruptly, all readings from both the star and the Cheonsa cut off. The main screen showed only empty space where Proxima Centauri had been. We've lost them, someone said in the stunned silence. Hours later, June sat alone in his office reviewing the final data transmissions from the Cheonsa. The mission had failed catastrophically. A star had vanished. The crew was presumed lost. And the Galactic Council would surely punish humanity severely for their reckless actions. Yet something in the final readings caught his attention. The star hadn't simply died, it had transformed into something else entirely, something their sensors couldn't detect properly. There was a pattern there, if he could only understand it. His door slid open. Director Sun entered, her face drawn, with exhaustion and grief. The Council has ordered all human ships to return to our solar system immediately, she said. They're imposing full sanctions. We're cut off from the rest of the galaxy. June barely heard her. Look at this, he said, pointing to his screen. The quantum signature just before we lost contact. It's not consistent with stellar death. Director Sun leaned closer. What are you saying? I'm saying Proxima Centauri isn't gone. It's changed. Into something new. And if we can understand that change... He looked up at her, a spark of hope in his eyes. This isn't the end. It's just the beginning. 3 months had passed since the Proxima Centauri disaster. Earth stood alone, cut off from galactic civilization by the Council's sanctions. No, alien ships were allowed to enter the Sol system, and human vessels were confined to their home space. In the underground research facility, now nicknamed the Crucible by the scientists working there, Professor June studied the final data transmissions. From the lost Cheonsa for the 100th time, dark circles shadowed his eyes from lack of sleep, but he couldn't stop. Something was there, a pattern in the chaos, if he could only see it clearly. You should rest, said Director Sun, placing a cup of coffee beside him. I can't, he replied, without looking up. Not when we're so close to understanding. Close? June, be reasonable. We've lost contact with the ship. Proxima Centauri is gone. The Council thinks we destroyed a star. But we didn't destroy it, he insisted, pointing to a section of the data. Look here, these energy signatures just before we lost contact. They're similar to what we see during quantum phase transitions. The star didn't die. It changed state. Director Sun sighed. Even if you're right, what good does it do us now? The Council won't listen. They've made us outcasts. Before June could answer, a young researcher burst into the room. Professor, Director, you need to see this. They followed her to the main observatory where a crowd had already gathered around the central display. On the screen was an image that made June's heart stop. Where Proxima Centauri had been, where empty space had existed for 3 months, was a soft blue glow. When did this appear? June asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Our deep space telescope picked it up 2 hours ago, answered the researcher. It's exactly where Proxima Centauri was, but different. June moved closer to the screen. It's emitting energy, but not as light as we understand it. That's why our regular sensors couldn't detect it. Are you saying the star transformed into a new type of energy source? Asked Director Sun. Yes, June replied, excitement building in his voice. The Prometheus device didn't fail. It worked too well. It pushed the star completely through its transformation, into a state we didn't predict. The discovery renewed hope, but also raised new problems. The Council remained unconvinced and unwilling to listen. Earth's isolation continued as the situation across the galaxy worsened. More stars were fading each week. In a small secured communication room, Ambassador Lee spoke with June via encrypted channel. Her holographic image flickered slightly, a result of the limited bandwidth allowed under the sanctions. "The Council still refuses to consider your findings," she reported. "They say the blue anomaly is merely the after effect of the star's destruction." "That's ridiculous," June protested. "It's been stable for weeks now. Our readings show it's actually generating more energy than Proxima Centauri did as a normal star, just in a form we're only beginning to understand." "I believe you," Ambassador Lee said gently. "But the elder species are set in their ways. They've existed for millions of years without facing extinction. They don't know how to adapt to something this revolutionary." June ran a hand through his hair in frustration. "People will die while they cling to their outdated theories." "Perhaps," the ambassador agreed. "But there's something else you should know. I've been contacted secretly by representatives from some of the younger species. They're interested in your research." Meanwhile, in the facility's engineering section, a small team worked quietly on a modified version of the Prometheus device. Engineer Min, who had helped build the original, now led this new effort. "The calibration is crucial," she explained to her team. "The first device pushed the transformation too quickly. This time we need to control the process." Beside her, Da Hyun, the young physicist, nodded. "According to my calculations, we need to stabilize each phase of the transition for approximately 20 minutes before proceeding to the next. Can we do that remotely?" asked one of the engineers. "We have to," Min replied. "We won't get permission for another manned mission." That night, June met with Director Sun and the project leaders in a secure conference room. The atmosphere was tense but determined. "The new device is ready," reported Min. "We've addressed the flaws in the original design. And I've identified another candidate star," added Da-hyun. "Barnard's star is showing signs of accelerated dimming. It could be gone within months." "The problem," said Director Sun, "is deployment. All our ships are being monitored. We'd never get the device there without being stopped." The room fell silent until a voice spoke from the doorway. "Maybe you don't need a ship." They all turned to see Commander Dae-ho standing there, thin and pale, but very much alive. "How?" gasped Director Sun. "The Cheonsa survived," he explained. "Simply. We were thrown clear when Proxima transformed. It took us 3 months to repair our engines enough to return home. We had to travel slowly to avoid detection." June stood and embraced his friend. "You saw it happen up close." "Yes." Dae-ho nodded, his eyes reflecting the memory of what he'd witnessed. "And I can tell you this. What we created isn't the end of stars. It's their future, their evolution." He placed a small data crystal on the table. "This contains everything we recorded. With this knowledge, we can perfect the process." For the first time in months, real hope filled the room. They were no longer fumbling in the dark. They had proof. They had a plan. And soon, they would have their second chance. 6 small, unmanned probes slipped away from Earth under cover of darkness. Each carried a refined Prometheus device, each headed toward a different failing star. The launch had been kept secret from the Galactic Council's monitoring stations through a carefully orchestrated series of power fluctuations that masked the energy signatures. In the command center, Professor June and his team tracked the probe's progress. The mood was tense but hopeful. This was their last chance to prove their theory before more stars failed completely. "Probe 1 has reached Barnard's star," announced Da-hyun, her eyes fixed on her monitor. "Beginning deployment sequence." On the main screen, they watched as the probe released its Prometheus device. The star looked sickly, its once warm red glow now dull and weak. "Device is active," reported Engineer Min. "Energy reading stable." June held his breath. The first attempt had ended in apparent disaster. Even with the new data from the Cheonsa and months of additional research, there were no guarantees this version would work correctly. "Phase 1 transition beginning," said Da-hyun. "Quantum flux increasing, stabilizing, holding." Minute by minute, the team guided the device through each careful step of the transformation process. Unlike the rushed first attempt, they now understood the delicate balance required. Final phase initiating, Min announced after nearly 3 hours of tense work. On the screen, Barnard's star seemed to pulse, then shrink rapidly inward. For a heart-stopping moment, it appeared to vanish entirely. Then, where the red dwarf had been, a soft blue-white glow appeared, similar to what Proxima Centauri had become, but more stable, more controlled. "We did it," whispered Director Sun. "The transformation is complete." The room erupted in cheers and embraces. After months of isolation and doubt, they had succeeded. They had not destroyed a star. They had helped it evolve. "Energy output from the transformed star is 300% higher than its previous state," reported Da-hyun in amazement. "And it's completely stable." "What about the other probes?" asked June, already thinking ahead. "All on schedule," confirmed Min. "Probe 2 will reach Epsilon Indi in 14 hours. Over the next 2 weeks, 5 more stars underwent successful transformation, each one adding to their understanding of the process. The 6th probe developed a navigation error and had to be remotely destroyed before reaching its target. But 5 successes out of 6 was beyond their wildest hopes. The consequences came swiftly. The Galactic Council could not ignore such blatant defiance of their sanctions, nor could they ignore the sudden appearance of transformed stars across nearby space. A delegation of Council representatives arrived at Earth, led by Morrow himself. They did not come in friendship. "You have violated multiple Council directives," Morrow declared in the hastily arranged meeting. "You have interfered with natural stellar processes despite explicit prohibitions." Ambassador Lee faced him calmly. "We respectfully disagree with your assessment. We haven't interfered with natural processes, we've facilitated them." "Ridiculous," scoffed one of the other delegates. "Stars are dying as they should at the end of their natural lifespans. You've merely created artificial energy sources that will soon fade." Professor June stepped forward. "If I may?" He activated a holographic display showing detailed readings from the transformed stars. "These aren't artificial. What you're seeing is the next evolutionary stage of stellar development." "Impossible," said Morrow, but there was uncertainty in his voice as he studied the data. "The stars aren't dying," June continued. "They're trying to transform naturally but lack the catalyst to complete the process. Our device simply provides that catalyst." Before Morrow could respond, an aide rushed into the chamber and whispered urgently in his ear. The council leader's expression changed from dismissive to shocked. "We've just received word," he announced slowly. "The central star of the Tenari system has gone dark." The room fell silent. The Tenari were one of the elder species with technology far beyond human capabilities. "How many lived in that system?" asked Director Sun quietly. 11 billion, replied Morrow, his voice hollow. Ambassador Lee stepped forward. "We can help. We have more Prometheus devices ready." "You expect us to trust human technology now?" demanded another delegate. "What choice do you have?" countered June. "More stars will fail. Billions more will die. Are your principles worth that price?" For a long moment, Morrow stared at the data still displayed on the holographic screen. The transformed stars glowed with healthy blue-white light, stable and strong. "The Council must discuss this," he said finally. 2 days later, the decision came. The sanctions against Earth were provisionally lifted. Human scientists would be allowed to deploy their technology under strict observation. It was not trust, not yet, but it was necessity. Within a week, a joint fleet launched from Earth orbit. Human ships carried the Prometheus devices while vessels from a dozen alien species accompanied them as observers and assistants. Their first destination, the Tenari home system where they hoped it wasn't too late. On the bridge of the lead ship, Commander Daeho watched the stars through the viewport. Some still shone brightly, others were noticeably dimming. All of them, he now knew, were waiting for the touch that would help them transform. "Course set for the Tenari system," reported his navigation officer. "All ships in formation. Take us to light speed," ordered Daeho. "We have stars to save." 20 years had passed since the first successful star transformation. Professor June, now with gray streaks in his hair, stood on the observation deck of the massive space station orbiting what had once been called HD 219134. The star now shone with a brilliant blue-white light, its energy output nearly 5 times what it had been before the transformation. The space around it bustled with activity. Ships from dozens of species moved in carefully coordinated patterns. Some carried scientific equipment, others transported materials for the growing structures that harnessed the star's new energy form. "Quite a change from when we were galactic outcasts," remarked a familiar voice. June turned to see Director Sun approaching. Though retired now, she still served as an advisor to the Stellar Renaissance Project. "Sometimes I can hardly believe it myself," he admitted. Below them, on the station's main level, representatives from over 30 species had gathered for the 20th anniversary celebration of what was now called the First Rekindling. Humans mingled freely with beings they had once thought of as alien, discussing technical details and sharing stories. "The latest reports just came in," said Director Sun. "The 1000th transformation was completed yesterday in the Orion sector." June nodded, feeling a quiet pride. 1,000 stars saved. 1,000 civilizations with a future. A soft chime indicated an incoming message. A holographic display appeared before them showing Da-hyun, now head of the Stellar Physics Institute. "Professor? Director?" she greeted them with a smile. "I thought you'd want to know immediately. The Council has approved our proposal for the Galactic Core Project." June's eyes widened. The Galactic Core Project was their most ambitious plan yet, a coordinated transformation of the massive stars at the galaxy's center. It had been controversial, with some council members arguing it was too risky. "That's wonderful news," said Director Sun. "There's more," continued Da-hyun. "They've requested that you lead the project, Professor." June was speechless. After all these years, to be trusted with such responsibility. "I told them you'd need time to consider," Da-hyun added. "But they were quite insistent. The Moro himself said there was no one better qualified." The mention of Moro brought back memories of those early days, the dismissal, the sanctions, the doubt. Now the same council leader who had once condemned humanity as reckless was requesting June's leadership. Later that evening, as the celebration continued around them, June found himself sharing a quiet moment with Ambassador Lee, who had become a close friend over the years. "Did you ever imagine it would turn out like this?" she asked, gesturing to the diverse crowd. "Never," he admitted. "I just wanted to save my own species. I never dreamed we'd end up saving everyone." "That's what makes humans special," said a voice behind them. They turned to see Moro approaching. The council leader had aged as well, his once silvery skin now with a pearlescent quality. "You never accept limits," Moro continued. "When we told you stars dying was inevitable, you refused to believe it. When we said transformation was impossible, you did it anyway." "We were desperate," June replied honestly. "Sometimes desperation leads to innovation." Moro nodded thoughtfully. "My species has existed for millions of years. We've seen civilizations rise and fall. We thought we knew everything worth knowing." He looked out at the transformed star. "We were wrong." A small commotion drew their attention. Commander Daeho, now Admiral of the Transformation Fleet, was entering the hall with a group of young human officers. Behind them came Engineer Min, whose designs had revolutionized energy collection from the transformed stars. "The old team is all here," observed Director Sun with a smile. "Not quite all," June corrected her gently. "We lost good people along the way." They observed a moment of silence, remembering those who had died during the early, dangerous days of the project. The moment was broken by an announcement that the ceremony was about to begin. As guests moved toward the central platform, June found himself standing next to a young Tenari scientist. "Is it true," asked the Tenari, "that humans knew the stars could be transformed because your planet experienced multiple extinction events?" June considered this. "In a way, yes. Our planet taught us that endings can be beginnings, that life finds a way forward even through disaster." On the platform, Admiral Deho began his address to the assembled representatives. 20 years ago, we stood at the edge of darkness, he said. Today, we stand in the light of 1,000 reborn stars. Screens around the hall displayed images from across the galaxy, transformed stars shining with new energy, thriving civilizations that had been on the brink of collapse, and construction projects that would have been impossible before. This is not just a human achievement, continued Deho. It belongs to all of us. Each species brings unique gifts to our collective future. As June listened, he thought about the journey that had brought them here, from outcast to savior, from isolation to connection. Humanity had given the galaxy its most precious gift, not just the technical knowledge to transform stars, but the perspective to see possibility where others saw only the end. Outside the viewport, the transformed star pulsed with healthy blue-white light. 1,000 others like it now shone across the galaxy, with thousands more to follow. The universe would not fade into darkness after all. Instead, it would shine brighter than ever before.